Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the Planning and Works Committee meeting on March 7th, 2023. I will now call the committee clerk to conduct the roll call.
Regional Chair Redmond. Councillor Craig. Here. Councillor Deutschman.
Yes.
Councillor Erb.
Here.
Councillor Foxton.
Present.
Councillor Harris. Councillor Hunick. See you there, thank you. Chair James.
Present.
Councillor Liggett.
Present.
Councillor McCabe.
Present.
Councillor Nowak. Present. Councillor Salonen.
Present.
Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Verbanovic.
Present.
Councillor Williams. And Councillor Wolf. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to acknowledge that the land in which we gather virtually and in person today is in the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and the Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements, and their contributions to our community. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none, there are no presentations. We do have a delegation. We will now proceed with the delegation as listed on the agenda. I would like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. Those who are joining us electronically, please leave your video camera turned off and your microphone and audio muted until you are called upon to speak. We ask that you leave the meeting once your issue has been addressed. If you are then welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting being webcast live via YouTube. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in the immediate removal of the meeting, interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, and any hate speech or defamatory comments. And one last reminder for delegations, please do not take offense if following your presentation there are no questions from council. We really take the time to listen and reflect and on the ideas shared from members of the community. With that being said, I'm going to call Hannah Domagala, Senior Project Manager, to present.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes, thank you. Okay, I'm here to follow up on the letter we sent on behalf of our company, which is the owner of 508 Riverbend Drive in Kitchener, regarding the Lancaster's ramp closures. We raised a number of points, which I wanted to reiterate here and focused on the last two the most. First of all, we know that by closing the ramps, the traffic will be increased. And although staff say that it won't be such a big impact, we already know that the intersection of Bridgeport and Lancaster is impacted by traffic at rush hours. And what we have to remember is that this area is also slated for urbanization, and there is a proposal of a lot of units right next to it already. With 1,000 parking spots, which will bring lots of vehicular traffic in addition to what is already there. So that is one of our concerns. The other one relates to the Bridgeport ramps, which the closure of the Lancaster Street ramps will impact, obviously, the Bridgeport ramps operations. If you traveled in that area, you know that to exit from the highway is very, very difficult into the left direction. So going east, because you have to cross traffic that is free flowing from both sides. So just adding more traffic to that road condition as it is right now is really going to be challenging. Staff say they will be working on it, and certainly we hope to see that. But there's also a proposal for bike lanes, which I'm totally for on Bridgeport Street. But when you think about the fact that there's 4 ins and outs into the highway at that location, adding bicycle lanes right in front of those crossings is just going to be very, very challenging. So again, to close the Lancaster Street ramps and only add to that dilemma is really not the best thing to do. The other thing we want is that these ramps already exist. So a lot of money and effort has been put in to build them. And now to close them is maybe not the best thing to do. And then the last point is the financial impact. impact. And again, I know that there's going to be money coming from MTO. But having sat through the budget discussions with you members of council, we know how difficult money is coming by these days. And to spend it on things that are not necessarily priority should definitely be thought about again in this time and day. And it doesn't matter to me if this is regional money or if it's MTO money, it's money that could be definitely better spent. And we know that ramps are big pieces of infrastructure, so to even get rid of them is going to be costing taxpayers a lot of money. With that said, I am definitely in support of bike lanes. Bike lanes coexist with traffic. I mean, I participated in numerous road designs, and I know that there's certain things that we cannot avoid. Yes, we can pretend that cars don't exist, but they do. We all drive them probably. So I would just urge you to think about the priority that this project has. And of course, if the infrastructure has to be rebuilt on Lancaster Street, then it needs to be rebuilt. But to close something that's already existing, people use, businesses will be impacted on Lancaster Street. Our uses and Lancaster Street uses will be impacted, and access. So I just urge you to rethink if this part of that project, the closing of the actual ramps, is really necessary. The amount of bike traffic there is probably not going to be the highest in the region. So again, there will always be conflicts. Are these the conflicts that we can live with? And I believe we can. And I just wanted to say thank you for listening to my short presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the delegation? Councillor Brovanovic, I know you have. Okay, all right. So then there are no questions for the delegation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hannah. We're going to move on to the actual report here. So I'm going to turn it over to Mathieu, Commissioner of Transportations, to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. So as you know, this report is about a project on which we've been working very closely with the Ministry of Transportation. So MTO is working on the rehab of the highway section, and they're looking for the region to confirm the assumption on what we would like to do with these ramps. From an MTO standpoint, the ramps are they're not performing well neither from a traffic flow or a safety point of view, mostly because of the collisions. As you know, the off-ramp from Bridgeport kind of weaves, the traffic has to weave in and out with the on-ramp that goes on Lancaster Street. And so the collision numbers that we have show that the number of collisions we had over the last 10 years is about 4 times greater than what's expected on a normal kind of on a similar ramp without that weaving pattern. Now, from a cycling perspective, the Lancaster Street corridor it's a critical north-south connector of the cycling network between. So we have Victoria, and then we have a project on Bridgeport and Herb Street, which are the big east-west ones, and Lancaster is really that north-south connector where we have an opportunity to provide an all ability and ages cycling facility all along on protected bike lanes, which is currently in the design stage. So that crossing of the highway is critical to enable that continuous connection between north-south between Victoria and Bridgeport and Herb Street. From a traffic perspective, so we know that these ramps they have relatively low usage. So there's, again, from a traffic perspective, the numbers are the nearby. So Bridgeport ramp, which is about 800 meters to the north, is 27,000 people per day versus less than 5,000 on the Lancaster ramps. And same at Wellington, which is just over 1.2 K to the south of this ramp, is 24,000. So we're really in sandwiched in between 2 ramps that have about 10 that combined have 10 times the traffic that we have on the Lancaster piece. And again, there's I would say by modern highway standards, the MTO would not have built another interchange within 800 meters of the first one, and we see the impacts on safety with that weaving pattern, which is problematic. So we've worked very closely with the City of Kitchener on this and engaged broadly the public. We've had nearly 3,000 visitors on the website, 700 survey respondents, which is, I think, what I heard from the staff. It's kind of a bit of a record for that type of project. But I think that's the result of our, our push to get significant media outreach on this through social media and through media releases picked up by all the TV networks as well as the local newspapers. So there are a lot of engagement and a lot of listening to the different points of view and understanding some of the impacts to local traffic, but also the key benefits for that important connector as part of our regional cycling strategy that supports the climate adaptation plan and climate change plan. So the report that we're bringing to you today is really about endorsing the closure of both of these ramps and placing the environmental study file on the public record, so we can provide this to MTO, who are in design on the rehabilitation project of the highway, and they can take that as their base assumption, knowing that right now they are supportive of this assumption, and will fund the work to remove the ramp as well as the rehabilitation and the redesign of the off ramp at Bridgeport to make it safer.
Okay, thank you, Mathieu. I see a few councillors with questions. Councillor Verbanovic.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mathieu, for the presentation. And we have heard from a delegation today. I also have heard from, and council, I believe, was forwarded correspondence that came through our executive assistant that. With some concerns from the area councillor in this neighborhood, and I've had an opportunity to have further dialogue with her, and I know that there is concern around traffic on Lancaster, which is already heavy. The challenges around the Bridgeport intersection that the delegation referenced. I know using that intersection myself to turn left many times is a problem, and so the Lancaster turnoff is certainly very beneficial. But this is a significant change. I mean, this is a ramp that's been in place for decades, and there hasn't been an opportunity for this to be considered by the area council. I know there's been dialogue staff to staff, and that's the normal course of business. But something this significant that impacts both regional and area roads should really have an opportunity for council engagement. And so I would like to see that actually happen. And so I'm wondering what if there would be any challenges or problems with deferring that, so that this can come back the next cycle potentially, and sooner if possible, so that there could be an opportunity for that engagement.
Okay, Mathieu, can you speak to that? Also, there is a project team as part of this. Can you just speak to who is on that team as well? Thank you.
Yep. So we did. I mean, on the project team, we did have City of Kitchener staff, and we worked closely together. I think on the risks for us, the risks of deferral are really that we know that MTO is in design currently, and they want to move on with the highway project, and they're not usually keen on waiting for local municipalities because they want to get on with their own design. So the risk for us would be to miss that window, and then make a decision, and then have to fund, for example, the removal of the ramps. Whereas right now they're within scope of their project, and we took a little bit of. We did take a bit more time than thought at the end of last year, especially to digest because we had a lot of engagement and we wanted a lot of engagement, so that took a lot of time to go through all this feedback. So I think now for us that risk is just make sure that we're not missing that window of opportunity with MTO.
So I mean, we talk about the engagement. I know. Some of the view that I've heard expressed, and we saw it in the email that came to council this morning, has been that staff had a predetermined outcome to this in the beginning, and I don't believe that to be the case. I think we engaged in the process, but there are issues and concerns that need to be addressed. I guess my concern is if the timelines are so tight, and we know these projects go on for years and years. with the MTO. I mean, I just read in the newspaper that apparently the Highway 7 project is delayed. I'm hoping that's not the case. I was kind of hoping that still moves forward in my lifetime. And so I'm struggling to think that this is like, why is it coming to us so late that, even if this council on its own had issues and concerns, there's no time left to work through some of those issues, not to mention the opportunity for input from the area council. So like, why is it coming to us so late at this point in time? Like for something so significant, like I get normally staff to staff when we're talking about speeds, when we're talking about a new traffic light, all those kinds of things, I'm not too concerned. But, I can't think in my time on local or regional council of a new expressway ramp being built or taken away. So it's not an everyday occurrence. So I think it does require a higher level of engagement.
I mean, through the chair, just very briefly on the timeline, I think, well, first, we are trying to do things more just in time than before, but through the engagement was so broad that took a little bit more time than expected. And on delaying it, I just wanted to share the factual risk, and we're happy to go back to MTO and assess that risk further. But it's just making sure, my objective is just making sure that council is informed of that risk. But we'll, should council defer the decision, we'll work with MTO to make it fit as much as possible with their design window.
Sure, and so, Madam Chair, at the appropriate time, I would like to, I don't want to move the deferral now because that'll stop other people from asking, but I'd like you to come back to me because I would like to move a deferral, and certainly if we can get it back to us here in time for regional council, that would be the hope, but just the way our cycles are aligning, I'm not sure we can get it back before the next cycle of the region, but we can certainly try.
All right, I will come back to you. I'll circle back. Councillor McCabe, you're next.
Thank you. Thank you for the information. I'm certainly, I guess to speak a little bit in response to Councillor Verbanovic, I'm certainly not interested in delaying this project. And I wasn't expecting that from Councillor Verbanovic. I mean, this project has been out for consultation through Engage WR months and months ago. So, I think I'm certainly prepared to and hope that this project can move forward, particularly because it is going to be building some of those bike lanes that we have great interest in building along the Bridgeport corridor there. So I'm very much hoping that that we can move this project forward. My question to Commissioner Getsky was around just what kind of provisions are being put in place for our fire response from either Kitchener or Waterloo in terms of being, if they have been specifically contacted regarding this change. And just what thought has gone into that, just to reassure us that there wouldn't be any service delays from that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I'll ask Steve or Paula to jump in and give a specific answer.
Through you, Madam Chair. Emergency services and fire were consulted during the process, and no concerns were identified by those groups. But they were consulted with.
Wonderful, thank you, and I appreciate that. I just think that's important for people for council here and anyone else to know. And certainly prior to being elected, I was on Waterloo Region's Transportation Committee, and this was a project that was brought to that committee months and months ago. So and we were pleased through one of the committee members was really pleased to work directly with regional staff at the time to provide for a couple of the cyclists and non-driver sort of perspective, how best to design this project. So they really, I know, thinking back to my time on that committee, they really appreciated the engagement that the region provided. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Okay, seeing no other questions from council, Councillor Brovanovic, we're going to come back to your deferral. We'll put a motion on the floor for that. Are you ready to? Okay.
Yeah.
We need a seconder for that. Okay.
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
Okay, Councillor Deutschmann.
And just from a motion point of view, Madam Chair, to be clear, the motion was that it'd be deferred until our next cycle, but as soon as our council meeting this month.
Okay.
I'm going to try to get it dealt with in our scheduling as promptly as possible.
Okay. Aaron, can you put that on the screen? So, okay, clerks will put that on the screen. I will read it and then we will vote. Oh, in the meantime, Councillor Foxton, question?
Just really quickly, if we defer it, would there be any impact?
So the impact, so through the chair, so the impact is really that risk of missing the window with MTO, but we have to get back to them. We'll have to get back to them to see, to accommodate that.
But we don't know if we're missing the window or not, if we got it back by the next meeting?
No, well, we can bring that back as quickly as possible. No, we don't know today because we were hopeful that council would decide today, but we'll work with MTO to make it work.
So, but we don't know for sure, right? If we miss the window. Okay, thank you.
So just to be clear, the motion that isn't to council on March 22nd, but it's to the next cycle of meetings, but as early as March 22nd. Because even if we dealt with this today, it wouldn't come before council until March 22nd anyway.
That's our council meeting. That's council.
Yeah.
Councillor Brovanovic, just a question. When is the next council meeting for City of Kitchener? When do you meet next?
Our next round of committee meetings isn't until after March 22nd, but I may see about calling a special meeting. But we also need to have an opportunity for our staff to take a look at this and consider it if they're bringing a report there. So, I think in fairness, it's unfortunate that we're dealing with such tight timelines here at the region on this, because it could have been regional council that had questions and concerns and deferred it back as well, from issues that we have from a regional perspective, not to mention the local area municipality concerns.
Okay. And now with Matthew, can you just clarify how long this project team has been working on this?
I'll ask maybe Steve or Paula to jump in, since I've only been here for 5 months, but I know it's been at least 5.5 months. But
just some historical context on this project.
Through you, Madam Chair, staff identified the opportunity about a year ago as we looked at the Lancaster project and the opportunities along that project to provide a AAA facility. And it was identified at that time, about a year and a half ago, I think, that the interchange was a major hurdle to providing a AAA facility on that project. And at the same time, we got wind that MTO was planning a rehab of the highway. So staff jumped on the opportunity and we turned this EA around in almost less than a year, which is actually, in my humble opinion, a pretty good turnaround, because sometimes they take 2 or 3 years. So we acted as fast as we could, but with some of the additional work for the consultation, it did take us beyond the end of 22, and that's why we're here before you, to try and get this approved early in 23.
Okay, thank you. And within the project team, there were City of Kitchener staff there. Were there any city councillors that were part of this process at all within the past year?
Not that I'm aware of. no city councilors, but city staff for sure, transportation staff.
Madam Chair. Yeah, just for the record, region only went out for public consultation on December 1st. That's when the media release was sent out by the region, and asking for any feedback by December 19th. So it hasn't been months and months ago that this has happened. It's been very recent, and there hasn't been an opportunity for it to be appropriately considered in fairness. And so I think it's only reasonable for us to allow that to occur.
Okay, thank you. I see we've got some in the queue here. So Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair James. And partially my question's been answered, and I understand that this is a motion to defer, so it's not debatable. I guess I'm just very unclear on what's going to happen between now and whenever this comes back. So I'm finding it difficult to support, notwithstanding the fact that I know there are people that have not been aware of this project for months and months, but this is March, and I do understand that there's a window of opportunity closing. So I guess and again, it may not be in order, but I'm just seeking clarity. We're going to hear back from the MTO. Are we going to hear from the community? Is this going to be a public meeting? I don't honestly understand what's going to happen between now and perhaps, did it say April 4th?
I can explain how I understand the process.
Okay, if you would, that would be great.
Okay, so we've got the motion to defer. If that passes, then I know, Mathieu, you will reach out to the MTO to see what the implications and the risk are to confirm that. In the meantime, Councillor Verbanovic, you may call a special meeting with council to review the information with your council and pose any questions back to the region.
I mean, at the end of the day, our council may express concerns. Our council may also support this going forward. I mean, to be clear, I'm very supportive of things like the bike lanes and so on, but there are some issues around traffic that are going to be caused by the closure of this ramp, and our council should have an opportunity to have some input into that. This is a major. This isn't changing the speed in front of a school or putting in a traffic light. This is a major impact decision.
So at the end of the day, if council, City of Kitchener Council says no, Mathieu, what are the implications to this project at the region?
I shouldn't say nothing. To be clear, council has an opportunity, and then regional council needs to consider how much weight they want to put into that or not.
Chair Redmond, does that make like a little bit more? The idea is to have this completed, or at least some answers, by March 22nd. However, we've got a little over a week, and if that's realistic in terms of timeline. I understand that if we wait till the next cycle, which is April 3rd, and an MTO wants to move forward, it potentially puts some funding of this project at risk. Point of order, Doug, Councillor Craig. Yeah. But you were talking, so I just wanted to, I don't know if that's the correct term, but distracting. Councillor McCabe.
Hi, thanks again. This does really concern me because it has been months. Like I said, on Climate Action Waterloo Region, our committee looked at this project and worked with some of the proponents of it. I mean, it was certainly months. It was in the summer when they brought back their concerns. And I know from Waterloo, the Engaged WR consultation that happened, it went out in late November. So this is months. And I guess I would say, if the City of Kitchener had some concerns about it, they should have looked at this, during that time frame, with all due respect, right? Like I worry about deferring this now, missing the opportunity for MTO to move forward and to pay, most importantly, to pay for this project. And I worry that delays in this and delaying this and may send the signal that you know, the MTO will move forward without you know, covering the cost of this program. And there's a lot of work that's been done, particularly on the plan and design of the bike lanes that are being designed to be implemented there. And yes, there's new development that's going to be planned there, but the meetings that we've had in Waterloo looking at that, we have talked about this and raised it. So I just don't think it's fair, really, to hold this project up because I mean, you know, if your council wanted to look at this earlier, they could have. And so, with all due respect, I really hope that we don't defer this project, and that we move forward today and let MTO know that we're interested in going forward with this, and most importantly, that you know that they'll pay for it. But I don't want to defer this project, and so I hope council votes along those lines.
Madam Chair.
We've got a queue here, Councillor Deutschman.
Yeah, could the clerk advise with a motion for deferral on the table, and what's the appropriate steps to be taken in terms of further discussion or voting on it? So just for clarification.
Yeah, so once we go through the list, which we've got 3 more speakers, then I'm going to have the motion put on the screen for us to vote on for the deferral.
So the deferral's not on the table right now?
No. It's not on the table yet. Okay?
Right.
All right. Okay. Moving along. Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. And I understand what Councillor McCabe's saying, but we weren't all on that committee that you were on, Councillor McCabe. So that gives you privileged information.
I wasn't on a municipal committee.
No, I'm not talking about, but
okay.
Yes. So
Dorothy, point of order. So okay.
So it's very fair that going through an election, everything at the same time, Councillor Mayor Bavanovic, his councillors may not have been aware of this. And that's a fair statement. An election year is hell for politicians, I'm sorry, because new ones are trying to play catch up. So I think it is not unreasonable for Kitchener to ask for this. My concern is similar to Councillor McCabe's, that we don't want to miss the window, because that's going to cost us a fortune if we have to do it on our own. And may cost it being shut down twice. Once for when the MTO does their project and once for what we want to do. So this consolidates both. My only concern is that time frame, because I do not want to miss this. But out of respect for Kitchener Council, I think we should defer just to allow them to be brought up to date. And because they weren't on, some of them weren't on before. Were you on before? Did you know about the Lancaster Street? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I knew about it from public engagement. Absolutely. But, you know, I do agree that there should be a little bit more information provided to council. But yeah, I knew about it. I know that there was a public campaign regarding it. News media have posted this. It was, you know, it was out there.
And one last question to staff. If, let's say Kitchener says no, and regional council says, well, okay, we'll back them. What does this cost us? Well, if region says no and MTO goes with their project and we have to do it separately, what is it going to cost us?
Well, through the chair, I think MTO has to do it. The ramps are their property, so they would, you know, if we're not part of this initial design, I think we're missing the boat on it. But you know, but if it's delayed, our objective is really to work with MTO to make sure that whatever decision is made by regional council, it fits within the design that MTO is working on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Huniak.
Through you, Chair James, I understand that Councillor Bavanovic wants to inform his council. I think that's really important. I'm just confused as to why that didn't happen in January or February, or even before the Engage WR publicity came out in December.
Is that for Councillor Verbanovic to respond?
It can be.
Or staff?
Yep. Or
Okay.
for the room.
Who's going to respond?
Okay, through the chair, I can respond. From a staff perspective, I know we had, I recall in November, we had a number of interactions with some councillors from City of Kitchener who had some questions, not really on the ramp closures, but more on the traffic impacts further north on Lancaster. So I recall the project team having some providing some additional information there. I don't know, maybe I'll call on Steve or Paul if there was more than that, but I do remember there was some information provided, again, more on the edges of the projects and the impacts on the adjacent neighborhoods.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think Commissioner Getsky's summarized the interactions that occurred during the consultation phase with some local councillors that were bringing forward some concerns that they heard. At the project team level, I would say several months before that, there was discussion about whether something should be brought to Kitchener Council, and Kitchener staff said it wasn't required.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Huniak, any further questions?
No, I don't think I will be supporting this motion because the time recommended for deferral is even less than the time that's already passed. So I don't know the productivity of deferring it for this period of time.
Right, thank you. Councillor Craig.
Well, I don't think this is a huge debate. I mean, we're talking about a deferral to the 22nd. Council at that time, if they have a change of heart, can overturn the recommendation of the committee. So I'm not quite sure why we're getting into this lengthy debate. Mayor Verbanovic has asked if we would defer this, and I think we should just extend the courtesy. The world's not going to collapse in the next couple of weeks while things are happening. So I think on 22nd, if people want to overturn today's recommendation, they can easily do that if more information comes forth. Call the question.
Okay. The question has been called. Clerks is going to put the motion to defer on the screen. We will vote for that. We have to vote for the... Okay, we have to vote to call the question. Yes, okay.
I'll stop you calling the question.
So do I need the mover and the seconder for that? Yes, okay, so moved by Doug, seconded by Rob. Okay. I'll get that up on your e-scribe. This is the motion to call the question. Councillor Huniak, we've changed that, okay? Thank you. Great. Okay, so that is carried. So now we will put the deferral, the motion, and that was who'd second for, so it's Barry and then Councillor Deutschman. So I will read the motion. It's not on my screen. Okay, so the motion is that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo defer the motion discussed under item 7.3.1 TSD TRP-23-002 Lancaster Street and Highway 885 ramp closure environmental assessment study to no later than our next cycle of regional committee meetings on April 4th and as early as council on March 22nd, 2023. Okay, so now your votes will, eScribe will prompt your votes for you. Okay, so that is carried. It has been deferred. With that, Mathieu, you'll look into the MTO risks, and Councillor Brovanovic, you will advise what you need from staff. Okay, all right. Okay, so that's been deferred. So now we will move on to our consent agenda. If you wish to remove any item from the consent agenda, please indicate so now, as we will not take questions on consent agenda items unless they are requested to be moved to the regular agenda. The items listed on the consent agenda will be dealt with in one motion. Are there any items that you wish to have removed from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, you will vote in eScribe. Oh, we need a mover and a seconder. Need a mover. Okay, Councillor Nowak, seconder, Councillor Williams. Now eScribe will be prompted. Okay, that is carried. Okay, so we will now go to regular agenda items. Okay. Okay, so first item on the agenda is 7.1 Strategic Focus, Healthy, Safe, and Inclusive Communities. We'll now call on Paula Whitlow, Director of Truth and Reconciliation, for a presentation on the Indigenous Space Needs Final Report.
Sego, Annie, bonjour. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. And I do have a presentation that's going up.
It'll be up momentarily.
There we go. So next slide, please. The Indigenous Space Needs Project was prioritized by the region in response to a community need stemming from the Community Safety and Well-Being Plan. Indigenous space in the region has been a topic of discussion for a number of years, and this report was a necessary step to capture the space attributes of the Indigenous community. Please note the green quotes on each slide. They are direct quotes from the conversations that occurred as a way to incorporate the voices of the community throughout the presentation. Next slide, please. From the beginning, the goal was to be as inclusive and as far-reaching as possible to gather feedback from any and all First Nation, Inuit, Métis people across the region. Our goal will be to continue to seek out opportunities that meet the accessibility and cultural safety of the Indigenous community. Next slide, please. This is not a one-size-fits-all approach. For some community members, outdoor and land-based activities is a priority. For others, indoor space with access to facilities such as washrooms and kitchens are required. For most, being on a transportation route and centrally located is a must. Being connected to land and water is fundamental to Indigenous culture and ceremonies. Next slide, please. It was important to have an Indigenous consultant with experience working in community oversee this project, rather than continue to ask and re-ask the same questions of participants. Various documents from the region were synthesized so that we could produce a what we heard list to ensure we captured prior needs and if there were any attributes missing to fill in those gaps. Next slide, please. Our consultant, Andrea Johnston of Johnston Research, Inc., is Ojibwe and known to a number of residents in the region. Our conversations occurred when convenient for the participants. We provided safe facilitation and trauma-informed safe space as we asked about what barriers, defining space, attributes, and envisioning what the space holds and would mean to each person. Next slide, please. A total of 23 interviews were held in the fall of 2022, representing 18 various First Nations, Inuit, and Métis organizations and community groups. The questions were structured like branches on a tree and explored past, present, transitional, and future space needs. Next slide, please. Many participants experienced one barrier or another and expressed that the barriers then and now are, for the most part, the same. Some examples include there's not enough dedicated areas to hold a sacred fire, or a grassroots drum group that requires a large space with the expectation they will create sound that will radiate and being told to quiet down or vacate the premises altogether. Next slide, please. Common characteristics for space include outdoor four-season space. Equally important is reconnecting with Mother Earth naturally on the land. Physical space that is all-inclusive for two-spirit, indigiqueer, accommodating disabilities from the youngest to the oldest in the community, and reflect the heritage and culture of all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the region. As Indigenous youth remain the fastest growing population in Canada, there's a great emphasis on ensuring Indigenous youth are connected to their culture. Next slide, please. While a report of this depth and clarity provides us with an excellent framework, we are anxious to continue to build momentum within the community and explore options on a new way forward. We look forward to developing more opportunities for dialogue, avenues of communication, and building relationships with our neighbors and each other. This, in essence, is working towards reconciliation. It's an ongoing process of establishing long-term relationships, and most importantly, that are authentic. Next slide, please. So some of the considerations. This is a call to action. To acknowledge Indigenous people are the primary partner in the development of policies, programs, and strategies that affect us all. Next slide, please. So I believe this might be or should have been titled Next Steps, not quite sure. But our next steps include that this report will be the guiding document towards incorporating Indigenous spaces within the region. That this report will go to RAP subcommittee known as Placekeeping and Land Opportunities with continued engagement and input into the process. This report will be shared broadly across all sectors so that everyone, including the private sector, can explore available space that can meet the needs of the Indigenous community. And as the quote states, we've been doing a lot of talking. I'm looking forward to action. And 2023 is the time for action. Next slide, please. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Paula. I couldn't agree more. We need more action. Any? I've got Councillor Foxton in the queue. Go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, the chair. Do you have a place in mind? I thought the report said the hub. Is that correct?
No, this report didn't mention specific locations. We were strictly looking for the space attributes that are required within the Indigenous community.
So would that be your next steps, is looking for specific locations to bring forward to council?
Through the Land and Placekeeping Opportunities Subcommittee, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you, and thank you for the report and the presentation. I'm trying to sort of put all the pieces together because the needs seem to be quite varied, and so it seems like there's not one space that would fulfill all of those needs. I guess I would ask, are you envisioning, or is the community envisioning one large space that would have all of these attributes, or would it be looking for more multi-spaces, a number of spaces?
Yeah, I think it's too early to tell right now. What we've done is just gathered the information, and I guess it's just whomever steps forward and wants to engage in partnerships with us will be what we would consider. So right now, it's like the sky's the limit, but we don't really have a specific space in mind at the moment. Some organizations do, and we will continue the conversation with them.
Okay, if I could have a follow-up, please. I'm wondering too about sharing of space. So are you needing specific space that is not shared, or is it space that could be shared with other groups or other areas? I just want to be cognizant of some of the concerns around colonialism and that kind of thing, and so just trying to get a sense of whether there's a possibility to combine with other uses, or whether you'd prefer to just stay separate.
No one that we spoke with mentioned that, but I wouldn't say that anything is off the table.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
I think there's staff here who also want to respond to Councillor Shantz's question.
Hi, I just want to clarify for your question. The report isn't also just to look at one specific space. It's looking at the attributes. It's multiple groups that we spoke to. So it's really the hope that the region and organizations and businesses can use this report to make sure that their spaces are inclusive and safe as well. So it's multi-layered, right? It's not just going to be looking at one moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful.
Councillor Huniak.
Through the chair, I thank you so much for your presentation, and I really enjoyed reading the report as well. I learned so much. This question might be premature, and if it is, forgive me. Deferrals are common, it's all good. I'm just wondering, one of the attributes had to do with year-round outdoor space. And I know some people have approached me about making the former Charles Street terminal the location of this hub. And so, would that have year-round outdoor space? Because as far as I know, the Charles Street Terminal property is only an indoor building.
There will be a Charles Street report coming up next, so I would prefer to defer to the report they're going to be presenting.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I was going to say it's the next report on the agenda, so we'll get to that. Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I'm a little late to the game, obviously, being a new councillor, but the whole consultation, I've seen a lot of, obviously, emails about the hub. Consultation with Cambridge, have you been involved in that at all? Because I don't see that in any of the written documents.
Through you, Chair, and I apologize. That was the first thing I was told not to forget. I'm aware of Kitchener's report We haven't really engaged much with Cambridge, but that's following up with the next steps. And I don't know if anyone in Chambers has any more information in that regard.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Staff want to respond as well, Councillor Craig.
Yeah, and I think I would say that in general, this work was led on behalf of all area municipalities. So we were in touch with staff at all the area municipalities, and it came out of the CAO group as well. So I would defer to CAO Lochner if he'd like to expand.
Yeah, in terms of overall engagement, all the area municipalities have representatives at the table that Paula sits on, and this report will go back to that table, and will definitely include any and all groups that want to be involved.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair James. I just really wanted to commend this hard work, and I know that Paula, while she hasn't been here for a really long time, is part of a really important team, and just point to Crowshield Lodge, which now has found a home at the Ken Seuling Regional Museum, and the fact that Anishinaabe Outreach has a facility. So there are many initiatives going on, and I really commend this report and the fact that it's also looking to the private sector to say, how do we, together as a community, respond to these needs? Because I think Councillor Shantz hit it on the head for me, and that's that they're really quite diverse. And I don't think that there is a location or one answer to the needs that have been articulated, whether it's land back or 7 generations. I think it's really important that we continue to work with all of them.
Thank you. Don't see any other questions. I also thank you for doing this work and the process. And often the process takes a little longer because of the connections and the collaboration that needs to happen. And each group is unique and everyone's needs are unique. So trying to get to common ground with that is part of a deeper process. So thank you very much. And this report was for information. Okay, so we are now moving to report 7.2, Strategic Focus Thriving Economy. Commissioner Roderick, you're going to introduce the Charles Street Terminal visioning process and community consultation update and presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair James. So this is also an information report. Matthew Chandy and Sarah Miller are here to make a presentation on this property. Approximately 2 years ago, we received direction from Council to conduct a process to prepare a vision for the Charles Street Terminal, the former central terminal for the GRT services in Kitchener. That process has been unfolding steadily over the last little while. We've had extensive public engagement. We've done a lot of work in terms of understanding the environmental conditions of this site. This is an entire city block that's owned primarily by the region of Waterloo and the city of, with a portion owned by the city of Kitchener. And so we've been working very closely with the city of Kitchener staff and a wide group of folks inside of the region here to get to where we are right now. I would just like to say that this is a very complicated site. It's an entire city block. It's got some significant environmental challenges. It's a site that does take some time to understand. We are in the process of understanding the site now, and its practical, technical limitations and the processes that we need to work our way through to find an appropriate vision for the site. So with that, I'll hand it over to Matthew to walk us through the presentation.
Great, thank you very much. And as Commissioner Regier said, this is a very complex site, and we're looking forward to providing you with an update on the work that's been done to date in the community, particularly on the community engagement and the discussions that have been ongoing, and also and also the technical work, which is also underway, but particularly the environmental work, which we have some initial results on, which we do want to share. I do also want to point out that we are far from done this process. There is still quite a bit of community discussion and engagement that is planned in 2023, and we'll be highlighting some of those planned activities for you as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. So when we do just want to acknowledge that where the Charles Street Terminal resides, and also that this has been a significant component of the planning process when we're thinking about the community engagement and the discussions that need to be had through this process, and continuing to build on that as we move forward in this consultation process. Next slide, please. So this site does matter for a number of reasons. It is a significant site. It's in the core of downtown Kitchener. It is a site that is partially owned by Kitchener and owned by the region. It is almost 3 acres in size for context, and that ownership split, and we'll show you a little bit more of the layout of the property, but it's about an 88% regionally owned, 12% city-owned site. So with that in mind, we have been working very closely in a working group that involves both City of Kitchener staff and regional staff on the work done to date. And, understanding that, the significance of this site, when we received direction from council to proceed with the work that's underway, the work has been based on 4 key principles around affordable housing, climate action, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and a thriving economy, all which have been reaffirmed through the work done to date and the discussions with community about the importance and significance of the site. So when we think about the site in itself, it has a very long history, and that history is very important to understand when we're talking about how we move forward with the site. If we go back to 1850s, there was a coal gasification site, a plant on the site or neighboring the Charles Street site, which has had impacts which we're learning of today through some of that environmental work. It was then turned over to the Bulla brothers, who used the site for retail. It was then used for, as we know, it was used as a significant bus terminal, so a key meeting point in the downtown Kitchener area. And in 2020, I think it's significant to note, just when we're thinking about our timelines with regards to the process, the site was used as a testing center during the height of the pandemic. So that did, for us, when we were thinking about trying to access the site at that time to do various work, the site was primarily occupied for that purpose. So it has, in its own way, served the community on a nonstop basis since the early days of the site. And also I want to point out, most recently, in 2022, the site was a filming site and the subject of the documentary Recollections and Imaginings by the Land Back Group. So very rooted in community and reflects the work that's been underway to date and how we're planning to move forward. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Miller now, who's been the project manager on this file, and she'll walk through some of the details of the community engagement that's been done to date, and also the results of some of the environmental work.
Thanks, Matthew, and good afternoon, Chair, members of Council. Next slide, please. Next slide. As Rod mentioned, this visioning process really started back in 2019, and fair to say we've all been through a lot since that point in time. There's been a lot of change in the world and certainly on the site. The project team's been busy since 2019, establishing a project working group in partnership with the city, contracting technical studies, including a land survey and environmental and geotechnical work, which we'll talk about today, clarifying project mandate and guiding principles, initiating engagement with community through broad public surveys and some on-the-ground conversations, which we'll also talk to you about today. And that brings us to today, which really is only part of the way through a very complex and important process. 2023 promises to be a full year with more stakeholder engagement and technical analysis to bring back to Council for recommendation. Next slide. Just a quick summary on the Charles Street Terminal Working Group. It really is a wonderful collaboration between the City of Kitchener and Region of Waterloo staff with a really thoughtful effort to bring together minds from different areas of each government, both in planning, economic development, housing, community engagement, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and our communications team. This group really started to meet on a bi-weekly basis at the start of last year. And I would say we're excited for what 2023 brings in terms of expanding this group to include members of community with the addition of 5 community connector roles, which are out and open to application, with applications closing March 24th. Next slide. So in terms of outreach and community, we've actually had 2 formal surveys as well as some on-the-ground outreach. The first survey was at the tail end of 2021, beginning of 2022. Those results came forward to Council back in June of last year, but thought it was worthwhile with a few new faces around the table to give a recap. We actually garnered over 1,000 responses through that online survey. The survey was posted through our Engage platform. And it really looked to understand community needs and community's response to the 4 guiding principles that are the basis for this project. The feedback affirmed the importance of the areas of consideration that were presented. So there was a high percentage of respondents interested in climate action, a strong push for affordable housing, a really strong focus on equity, and in particular, the push for community-centered solutions, and a clear interest in seeing, as I said, affordable housing on the site and a call for Indigenous reconciliation. As I mentioned before, in direct response to this feedback, our project team kind of took a step back and said, how can we do more to bring community into this conversation? And from that, the community connector positions were created, as well as the opportunity for a community facilitator to come on board and really help our team have the conversations in community that government aren't typically able to have. We are looking forward to bringing that community facilitator or facilitators onto our project team in the coming months. Survey 2 occurred at the end of the summer last year, and that was a combination of an online survey as well as some on-the-ground work, which we called our street teams. We actually went out to 7 different locations in downtown Kitchener, including the markets along Gaukel Street, the Farmers Market, Victoria Park, bus stations, ion stops, and really wanted to have some face-to-face conversations with why people go downtown, what they think is missing from downtown, and some bold ideas that they thought would work for the Charles Street Terminal. We had just over 500 responses between people we spoke to face-to-face and folks that responded through our Engage platform. And in summary, the feedback there that we heard was the importance of this being a multimodal site, recognizing that there's opportunity here for housing, healthcare services, retail, and community space. Again, the continued desire for affordable and supportive housing options, the need for an inclusive space in downtown Kitchener, particularly for Indigenous, Black, racialized group, and 2S LGBTQ+ peoples, and also a community gathering space. That came up a number of times and sort of continues the thread from Paula's work in the need for indoor and outdoor options for community to access. We also wanted to acknowledge the community-led engagement here. Matthew mentioned it earlier, but the work of the Land Back Camp group in starting back in 2021 to really drive a community conversation around the future vision for this site has really brought some new ideas to the table, and those ideas will be incorporated and considered as part of the overall process. We also wanted to mention the importance of aligning and incorporating the feedback gained through other work. Again, to Paula's point from the earlier presentation, we recognize we're going out to community multiple times, asking similar questions. So where we can consolidate work that's happened previously, we'd like to bring that forward through this visioning process. So that's tying in work from our community safety and well-being plan, this Indigenous space needs study, feedback we're getting through the upstream fund, and the work that our children and youth planning table are doing with the youth. Next slide, please. Again, just to highlight the focus on community-centered engagement, it's been a consistent thread that we've been hearing from the survey work to date, and we're really conscious of continuing to listen to that feedback and learn as we move through this process. Part of that I've already mentioned. I guess a couple of other highlights here is that we are acknowledging the traditional history of the land through our Engage platform and acknowledging the work that's happened in community. Next slide, please. Our engagement timeline moving forward, you can see we've got a busy 2023 ahead. I've mentioned a few things regarding the expansion of the working group and the onboarding of community-based facilitators. Stakeholder Labs is really the next phase of our public community outreach, and that's a much more targeted conversation directly with folks that we know have ideas around the site. And we've sort of broken down a variety of groups that we're calling key stakeholders, including the Downtown Kitchener Business Community, Downtown Kitchener Action Advisory Committee, our downtown neighborhood associations, housing industry, affordable housing providers, environmental groups, youth, post-secondary students, and arts and culture groups. We also look, just back quickly. Beyond our stakeholder labs, we also see that there's an opportunity to bring people onto the property. We haven't quite figured out how to make that work, but we're conscious that it's been sitting vacant and community want to be able to experience the space. Once we have our community connectors on the working group, we're looking to flesh out some ideas to bring forward through 2023. And finally, I've got there a note on design charrettes over the course of the summer. As we gain this feedback, we are starting to come up with some visual sort of design parameters that we'd like to bring back to community for feedback. Next slide. While all this community conversation is happening, the project team is also busy on technical work to understand the site and the complexities of redevelopment. To date, we've completed a boundary and topographic survey. We've undertaken some background precedent best practice in terms of mixed-use development and some community needs research. And we've also initiated a phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessment and geotechnical study. We'd like to talk to you about those results today. Next slide, please. We engaged a group MTE consultants to conduct this work on site. It started last summer and their draft results were issued just before Christmas last year. Those findings did indicate some contamination on the property. And as Rod mentioned at the start of this conversation, it is a complex site. They've identified both soil and groundwater contamination, with generally shallow soil contamination that's related to lead and hydrocarbons at a depth of about 1.5 meters below surface. There's also some identified localized deeper soil contamination on the property that's likely attributed to waste from the past demolition of buildings. Road salt impacts are present, and some groundwater contamination has also been identified on the site related to chlorinated solvents, as well as localized metals and acid-based neutral compounds. I can say this work from MTE did confirm that there was no on-site source identified. It's also important to say, after all of those very technical terms, that none of these findings are overly surprising, given the context and industrial history of the site. It's important for everyone around this table to know that. But what is important is for us to figure out a path forward to remediate the site and steward it into redevelopment. And that's what's next on the table for staff. Environmental remediation is a complex process, and we're currently assessing the right path to address contamination and achieve a record of record of site condition before redevelopment. That options analysis is including an assessment of timelines, liability for community, the city, the region, limitations on development options, and brownfield eligibility. We are looking to complete that analysis and bring it back to this forum for recommendation. Next slide, please. Beyond the environmental analysis, additional technical work on the site, including design work, cultural landscape study alongside the work of the City of Kitchener, servicing assessment, financial modeling, and a disposition strategy are all underway over the course of the next 8 to 9 months, with the intent to, again, bring back those reports to Council for consideration and discussion. Next slide, please. The project budget for the Charles Street Visioning Project was approved back in 2020. I apologize, there's a typo there, 2020. The total project budget was $800,000. Costs incurred to date on the project total just over $228,000, and you can see there a breakdown of the cost spent to date, with the budget allocation remaining just over $570,000. We anticipate all of the consultation work and technical studies we've spoken about to be captured in that budget. Next slide, please. In summary, we've got a busy year ahead. The site has a complex industrial history, but also presents a tremendous opportunity for the city and the region to do something really special. And we're taking this process very seriously, and those things take time. So happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you so much for a presentation and the information and the work that's going into this site. I have no questions from council. All right, thank you. Okay, sorry, Councillor Deutschmann, just saw you pop in there.
Thank you, Chair James. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
I'll ask Councillor Harris why he couldn't hear me. Just kidding. I just wanted to understand, very good presentation. I appreciate all the work that's going into it. But what is the end game here? Is it something that we're going to develop? Is it something that we're going to sell and someone else will develop?
Deutschmann, can you just repeat your last part? You kind of cut it out a bit.
Okay, my apologies. So is this something that we are going to develop, or is this something that we will tender out with certain parameters, like a request for proposal, so that someone else is doing that work? I'm just trying to understand where this is going, because we're getting members of the community asking us what we're going to be doing with this property. And obviously it's different if we're taking on the work versus someone else doing the work, I would think. So maybe you could offer some guidance, but I saw quite about disposition in your presentation.
Commissioner Regier?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, this site presents a wide array of opportunities, and what we're proposing to do is bring back a proposed method for disposition and redevelopment with the next set of reports. So by that point, we will have done a lot of work on massing. We will have consolidated the information on community aspirations. We will understand all of the environmental issues associated with the site, and we'll have a good sense of what the appropriate mechanism for managing the environmental risk on this site will be. So once we've consolidated that information, we'll come back to council with a proposed strategy for facilitating the redevelopment of the site. At this stage, frankly, I think it'd be a real surprise if we recommended that this region redevelop it itself. I think this is a site which presents a lot of opportunity for the community as a whole, but we need to do a little bit more work before we determine what the mechanism is.
Just for clarification, Madam Chair, so are we able to set parameters on any developer who would undertake this site, saying, for example, we want an Indigenous hub, we want affordable housing, any other cultural interests, that sort of thing? I want you to set those parameters in terms as we're going through this consultation process with the community.
Yes, absolutely. I guess council would have the opportunity to sell the site outright and have somebody redevelop it without conditions, but certainly as the property owner with the City of Kitchener, we do have the scope to determine what the conditions of disposition would be.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was interested in, was being able to establish some conditions, because obviously this is a very important site for many in the community, and it hate to go to a developer without us having some opportunity to guide what is put there in the heart of our region, the City of Kitchener. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you for the presentation. It's just a quick question with I know you've said you've done some extensive consultation and that's been going on for quite some time, and you've been working with lots of different groups, including, City Council in Kitchener as well. Just wanted to ask if you are working directly with Six Nations of the Confederacy and Healing of the Seven Generations and some of those groups.
I'll take a shot at it, but if I'm off base here, Matthew and Sarah will correct me. Hopefully, we've been consulting with a wide array of community groups. I don't know specifically if the groups that you've mentioned have been included in the discussion, but certainly, we're currently, as Matthew had mentioned, planning to engage with additional organizations, so it's maybe possible to involve them through this process in the next stage.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, my understanding is particularly around land issues. Six Nations of the Confederacy is a group that at least at the City of Waterloo, I know that's a group that we consult with specifically around land and land use issues. So I was assuming that would be the case with the region of Waterloo as well, but maybe I'm wrong on that. And then of course there's like groups like Donna Dubé's group, Healing of the Seven Generations and Anishinaabe Outreach and White Owl, and the groups that have been in our community for quite some time. I just want to make sure that their voices are of course included in any of this consultation as well.
Councillor McCabe.
As well as the array of other community groups that you're talking
Councillor
about.
McCabe, just going to have Bruce, do you want to respond to that? Matthew, you'll respond, just to clarify some of your questions around the ask here.
Thank you. Thank you. Through the chair, just a quick comment on that. That is actually, it's been primarily broader community consultation at this point. Specific outreach to different community groups, including some of the Indigenous community groups that you just mentioned, is planned for 2023. So that is part of the plan for this year. So I just wanted to let you know that will be happening and is part of the plan.
Great. Thank you.
Bruce.
Thank you, Chair. And just to add to what Matthew said, as part of Paula's work, those groups were engaged and will continue to be engaged. So just a little glimpse into either April or May, we're going to bring back some broader discussion about some of our other locations and regional properties that some of those groups are interested in. So Charles Street is just one, but we've had lots of questions from different members of council on the current Central Division as an example, as well as our daycare center. So staff will be bringing back a specific report on those sites.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Chair James, and thanks for the report and all the work that's going into this. The environmental remediation of the site that would have to take place, would that be the responsibility of the region and the city, or would the expectation would be that whoever is going to develop it would be responsible for that? Or is that to be decided?
Through the chair, to be decided. That would be part of the follow-up after we complete the analysis. We'll come back with options for consideration by council. So that analysis it really depends on the rest of the technical information that comes out of it, and then we'll be able to determine what we'll be able to put a proposal in front of council.
just to follow up if I may. So the comment was that what you have discovered on the site wasn't a surprise based on what had been discovered on other sites in downtown Kitchener. So the expectation would be that there's not going, or are there going to be major other surprises, or I guess that's something that you can't respond to based on the technical work that still has to be done?
I'm going to just ask our Sean from our environmental team to respond to that.
Thanks, Matthew, and through the chair. The full phase 1 and phase 2 are complete at this time. So no, we aren't expecting any surprises at this point in terms of the environmental conditions. It's more finding the path forward to deal with those.
Good, thank you.
Okay, we're about to go into the second round of questionings. Is there anybody else? Councillor Vrbanovic, I saw your name pop up. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having some issues with clicking in. Thanks for the presentation. It's certainly been, I think, very helpful and very informative, and I know our staff have appreciated working with you and your team on this issue. I am pleased to hear in terms of both the level of engagement that's happened and sort of what's being proposed in terms of some targeted groups. I did note in your list you referenced downtown neighborhood associations. I'm wondering, like, that tends to be a fairly finite group in terms of people, but we're seeing, for example, in some of the new condo buildings and so on, that they're creating their own little associations and so on, whether it's a condo board or otherwise. And I'm just wondering, are you seeing them as being part of your consultation process as well as, like, in terms of subgroups that you're going to try to reach out to?
Yeah, through the chair, absolutely. We'll reach out to as many people who want to have the conversation. We'll work directly with the Kitchener team, who have been instrumental in helping to identify who to connect with in downtown Kitchener. So we'll make note of that and have that discussion on how we can specifically target that group.
Yeah, fantastic. That would be great. And I guess just further to Councillor Erb's question, will part of the analysis, I guess, that staff are going to look at in terms of how we might proceed with this, in terms of any potential cleanup that needs to happen, if we do it, like if it's our project, then we would need to tackle that. If it's another party's project, particularly one that has to pay property tax, then it could be eligible for both the city and regional cleanup programs in terms of remediation. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is correct.
Okay, so that would then become part of that ultimate analysis.
Correct. It's part of the analysis, and if that were to go that way, would future proponents still qualify for that grant?
Okay, great. Yep. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Just one question of clarification before I get to Councillor Deutschman. Rod, can you please clarify which area of the terminal, the Charles Street terminal, is owned by the City of Kitchener?
Yeah, through you, Chair James. The city owns about 12% on the south. It's the parking lot on the southeast corner of the site. Although, honestly, the directions in downtown Kitchener are a little wonky. So
Charles in Ontario corner, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Deutschman, thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to know, the various groups that are clearly interested in this site, do we want to update them to let them know when the report is coming to council, and two, are they getting a copy of something like this report or an update so that they're aware of the various stages or status of this project?
Through you, Chair James. Yes, so we've met with representatives of Land Back Camp about a week and a half ago, I guess it was. They've been provided with the report in advance and also all the earlier reports that pertain to the site. So I think that they've got certainly everything that has been presented to council right now.
So sorry, just to clarify, so they got a copy of the report like we got today?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this report is for information. Any other questions from council? Nope. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Okay, we are moving on to item 7.2.2, the year-end 2022 population and household estimates for Waterloo Region. This is a staff presentation. Rod, I will turn it over to you to introduce this.
Thank you very much. And Chair James, I might say about going back to the last report that I'd like to draw council's attention to the back of the report. We've got a glossary of terms. So for those for people who are new to council, we realize that we speak in a lot of jargon, and so some of that is clarified. I'd draw your attention to the glossary at the back of that last report. Yes, acronyms. So if you ever catch us using acronyms, please interrupt. This is this presentation, which Danielle is going to make for us. Welcome, Danielle. Is the reason we're interested in bringing this to council's attention is that we periodically publish updates on changes to the region that take place, which we monitor in partnership with our area municipalities, with industry, and with Statistics Canada. We had a series of reports. We have a series of reports here on the agenda, which help paint a picture of how the region of Waterloo is evolving. You'll recall that last year we had an extensive conversation about the future of the region. We painted a picture. We made some decisions about the way that the region would grow over the course of the next 30 years. We formalized that in an amendment to the regional official plan. As a part of that process, we committed to continuing to monitor our performance and the assumptions that we've made in that set of amendments, so that we can test those assumptions and make sure that we're on track. That work is ongoing with our area municipal colleagues. And today, Danielle will present, give us a presentation that ties together the three reports that you've got in today's package and relates it back to the regional official plan and our vision for the region of Waterloo. So over to you, Danielle.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Rod. As Rod mentioned, I'm here today to provide a presentation on population and housing in the region. We've tied this presentation to the year-end 2022 Population and Household Estimates report, but we'll also highlight, as Rod mentioned, a few of the key points from the Building Permit Activity Report, as well as the Development Application Activity Reports, which are also on today's agenda. To start, we'll go through a few of the key housing-related concepts that are a focus of Regional Official Plan Amendment 6, or ROPA 6, as I may refer to it throughout the presentation. And then we'll go through our current population and household estimates, our regional housing supply, and wrap up with some information on recent provincial initiatives relating to housing. Next slide. You can actually skip to the next slide. In August of 2022, Council adopted ROPA 6, which is now before the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing for approval. This was a really significant achievement and a body of work that was undertaken in partnership with the area municipalities and with significant engagement with stakeholders, the public, and First Nations. The focus of the amendment was on growth-related components of the Regional Official Plan to align with updated provincial policy. The amendment plans for a population of 923,000 people and 470,000 jobs by 2051. This represents growth of 306,000 people and 168,000 jobs between 2021 and 2051. The amendment implements the regional vision as outlined on the screen and supports equitable, thriving, and sustainable communities. Next slide. The Regional Official Plan advances sustainable, equitable, and thriving communities through a focus on intensification and utilizing existing infrastructure, a housing mix that provides people with more options, support for 15-minute neighborhoods, balancing growth for all municipalities, and an emphasis on continuing to grow and retain our diverse employment market. Growing the region over the next 30 years is a collective effort between the region, area municipalities, developers, stakeholders, and the community. Next slide. This slide shows the population forecast for the region to 2051. As I mentioned on the previous slide, we're planning to accommodate a population of 923,000 people by 2051, which represents growth of just over 300,000 people over the next 30 years and represents a 50% increase over the current population. Next slide. So on this slide, we're going to talk a little bit about housing mix. Continuing to build more homes is important, but it's also really important to build the right homes. Building the homes that will meet the needs of our changing population will help ensure we have homes for new families, students, and seniors. The region will accommodate the forecasted population to 2051 with an additional 121,000 housing units. This slide provides details about the region's current and forecasted housing unit mix. The blue sections on the graphs represent low-density housing, which is primarily single or semi-detached homes. Orange represents medium density, which includes townhomes. And the green represents high-density units such as apartments. The region's housing mix is currently dominated by low-density dwellings. The majority of housing by 2051 will still be low-density dwellings at 45%, but there will be a greater proportion of medium and high density, providing more choice in terms of housing type, size, location, and prices. Housing mix is part of the solution to achieving things like housing affordability, housing our existing and future workforce, providing opportunities for aging in neighborhoods, and housing for people at all stages of life. Next slide. The Regional Official Plan provides a solid foundation to ensure the region has land available to house our growing community. Overall, the region has an available land supply for residential development of 2,900 hectares, or 7,170 acres. These lands have the capacity to support the construction of over 51,000 new housing units over the next 30 years, with the remaining 70,000 units being built in the region's existing built-up area, primarily in our major transit station areas. There are many factors that contribute to the delivery of these units to the market. These are things such as population growth and associated demand, interest rates and the cost of borrowing, income of buyers, regulatory requirements, material supply, and labor supply. Next slide. The year-end 2022 Population and Household Estimate Report on the agenda today, as Rod mentioned, is an annual monitoring report that provides population estimates for each area municipality within the region. These figures are used by various departments for reporting and monitoring purposes and shared with area municipalities. This slide shows the annual population growth in the region from 1998 to 2022, and that is shown in the green bars on the screen, as well as the total population of the region, which is shown on the blue line graph on the screen. The region's current year-end population at 2022 is estimated at 647,500 people, which represents growth of almost 15,000 people from 2021. There's many factors that have likely contributed to this increased rate of growth, including a significant increase in immigration nationally, provincially, as well as within Waterloo region, as well as continued growth in international students. One minor thing to point out is that the actual increase in population was 14,650 people from 2021, not the 14,950 people, which is stated on the first page of the report. Thank you. Next slide. The two other reports on today's agenda that relate to housing growth are the summary of 2022 development application activity, as well as the building permit activity from January to June of 2022 reports. The region tracks this information to monitor what's planned as well as what's built across the region. Since 2020, the region has seen an increasing number of building permits issued. In 2020 as well as 2021, the region issued permits for around 6,000 units per year, which was an increase from the historical average of 4,000 units per year prior to 2020. The increased number of permits are almost entirely located within the region's existing built-up area, mainly around the ION system. Permit activity for the first half of 2022 was aligned with activity for 2020 and 2021. And we've begun to analyze the full 2022 building permit data set at a high-level assessment for the year, and it does show that we may have issued less permits last year than we've typically seen in the past couple of years, but more than our longer-term average of the 4,000 units. Further information on the region's full year of building permit activity will be coming to the council in the coming months. Development application activity remains strong throughout 2022. While slightly lower than 2021, the number of applications received in 2022 was almost 40% higher than pre-pandemic application levels. The region also currently has over 35,000 units in some stage of the subdivision development approvals process, which represents roughly 9 years of supply. Next slide. Increasing our housing supply and choice can provide people with more housing options, which can provide better affordability in the housing market. In 2022, the average sale price of a new single detached house in Waterloo region was $1,272,340, while the average sale price of a new apartment or condo unit was $534,233. Building a greater range and mix of housing can work towards building units that more people can afford. Next slide. It's a collaborative effort to deliver housing in the region, including affordable housing. In terms of some of the regional focus to date, the region has provided comments on and processed a record number of development applications in the past 3 years. The region is investing in a new development tracking system, which will further increase efficiency and transparency in the housing approvals process. The region is also contributing with the goal of building 2,500 affordable housing units, and will need to continue to build where we can leverage existing infrastructure to bring housing on more quickly. Next slide. Increasing housing supply is an objective which is shared with our provincial government. The province has released Bill 23, which is aimed at increasing housing supply and reducing the cost of homes across the province. The bill intends to do this through a variety of ways, which includes reducing development charges, allowing for up to 3 residential units on a single residential lot, limiting appeals to the Ontario Land Tribunal, shifting upper-tier planning approvals to area municipalities, and setting 10-year housing targets to be achieved through municipal housing pledges. The province has set a goal of building 1.5 million homes over the next 10 years. For Waterloo region, the 3 cities were given housing targets, which total 70,000 units over the next 10 years. This would require building roughly double the housing on an annual basis than the cities have seen historically. Next slide. In summary, Waterloo region is growing at an increasing rate, and we are attracting a significant number of new people, including students and new talent, to the region. We have a plan to build more homes in the places people want to live, leveraging our existing infrastructure and providing a greater range and mix of housing options. With over 35,000 units currently in the development approvals process, the region is well positioned to deliver housing that people need. That concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Quite a bit of information in that presentation. I have a few councillors in the queue. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you. Danielle, can you go to your pie chart, the one with the pie chart? It's just something I didn't understand, and so I'm asking for council's indulgence. Can we put the pie chart up? Oh, thank you. While it's coming up, you had the pie chart for 2021 or something, the middle one, and it said 21 to 51, and then in 2051, and that's what I don't understand. In 2051, we're going to be 45% low density, but in 2021 to 2051, we're going to be 19%. So are we going to destroy a bunch of others to allow the, I don't understand.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair, I'll give a high-level overview, and then we do have Ryan with us today, who is the report author and one of our driving forces behind our data unit within the region. So this slide does represent, on the left-hand side of the left-hand side of the slide, the current housing unit mix in 2021. In the middle, what that represents is the incremental increase within the housing unit mix. So really what that is doing is shifting the units in terms of the mix to 2051. Is there anything you want to add to that?
I got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. I wonder if you can connect some dots for me. So in the report, it talks about the average number of persons per unit at 2.7. So as we increase the high density, I know a lot of what we're building now is much smaller. Do we see, how do we see that mix panning out over the next 30 years? And what does that do to our projections?
Thank you. And through the chair, I'd ask Ryan to speak to our PPUs and currently seeing, as well as what was projected under the RUP.
Thank you. Through the chair, what we're currently seeing is significantly more high density, which does have a lower average occupancy. But we're also noticing that more of our existing neighborhoods are starting to turn over with young families. So we're starting to see the older generation leave their single detached home, the empty nesters, and they're being filled with families. So we're seeing kind of families occupy those old neighborhoods again. Over the longer term, we are predicting that the PPU will continue to decrease slightly. It's currently at 2.7, and we projected that last year. We were also at 2.7, so we haven't really seen a shift there. But over the long term, we do see it decrease slightly. But I haven't memorized the numbers from our regional official plan, but we do see it taper down a bit.
Okay. All right. Councillor Deutschmann.
Thank you, Chair James. If you could go to slide number 9.
Just give clerks a second there, Councillor Deutschmann. They're pulling it out.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. So, today we have 6,000 new houses. Traditionally, I think you said our average is about 4,000 units per year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And when you say we're currently 35,200 units, roughly 9 years of supply, you're basing that on the 4,000 per year?
Through the chair, the 35,000 units that are currently somewhere within the development approvals process include registered and unbuilt, so those that are ready to go, those that have draft approvals, as well as those that have had some form of pre-discussion.
But when you say that's 9 years of supply, is that based on that 4,000 units per year number in the first bullet?
Go ahead, Ryan.
So the 35,000 unit number reflects our supply in the development approvals process, which is largely in plans of subdivision, so our greenfield areas. In greenfield areas, we typically build about 2,000 units a year. The other 2,000 to 4,000, as we've seen our building activity shift to the 6,000, has been in the built-up area, largely around the MTSAs.
But the 35 in the 9 years, that's roughly 4,000 a year. Is that not correct, or am I missing something with respect to that?
I have to do quick math in my head.
I can.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. But so you're not using the 6,000 number, which seems to be what we're currently building?
Yes, so we typically, right now in the last few years, we have been building 6,000, but a lot of those additional units that we've seen as an increase from the historical 4,000 have been MTSA unit growth, which aren't captured in planned of subdivision application processes. They come through plans and OPAs.
Hold on a second, Councillor Deutschmann. I'm going to have Rod weigh in here a little bit before you can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just just to clarify, the 35,000 units in plans of subdivision are almost exclusively greenfield in the periphery of the built-up area, or outside of the built-up area, and that in the last number of years, that area has received approximately 35% of the total growth that the region is experiencing. So the bulk of our growth, as was mentioned earlier in the presentation, is actually in those station areas in medium and high density developments. Right. The 35,000 units doesn't include all of the growth that we're seeing inside of those areas.
Okay, and so the 7,000 target number under Bill 23, if I have that correct, are we going to be on track to meet that target?
Well, through you, Chair James, this is going to be a challenge. You can see here that we in the last 3 years or so, we've built about 50% more housing annually than we did in the 10 years prior to that on an annual basis. But and so, taking it from 6,000 to 7,000 is not such a dramatic leap as we've already experienced. But frankly, the challenge will be one of the market. Will the market deliver those houses, those homes? Is the labor available? Are supply chain issues resolved so that industry can actually deliver that volume of housing? Certainly, we've seen very aggressive investment, and the market has been very strong in the previous 3 years. We'll expect it to change now in the next year, but I think it's a really interesting and important question. Can we actually build the 7,000 per year? Certainly, we have enough land to do that, but there are significant challenges for the industry to ramp up and deliver the additional housing.
And Madam Chair, if I just conclude, the reason I bring this up is because Councillor Craig received a response from the MPP for Cambridge. In that letter, the MPP explicitly stated that councils or townships or municipalities will be made whole with respect to losses from Bill 23 if they meet the targets established by Bill 23. And I think that's a real concern that we have to also clarify with the province in terms of lobbying on a whole raft of issues, but certainly in this area, what are the expectations in order to replace, for example, the losses we anticipate with development charges, and how much are we going to be left on the hook with if we are unable, despite all our best efforts, to meet those targets? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deutschman. Councillor Foxton. Oh, you already spoke. Councillor Verbanovic.
Thanks very much. And I'm wondering if I can just maybe get some clarification, because I understand the population estimates and how important that is for all of us. I guess I'm struggling a little bit around the housing supply and so on questions, because my understanding in Bill 23 is the responsibility, the commitment, the pledges around that have all been left with the local municipalities. And so I'm just a little thrown why we're going into some of this detail other than general understanding and knowledge. Or are we trying to, as we all know, our ROP is under appeal right now. Are we trying to reaffirm our position on the ROP in a public setting? I'm just not sure where this conversation's going today, to be frank.
Yeah, through you, Chair James. These are just information reports. We wanted to tie them together with the forecasts that had been presented in the ROP, because the information is brought together to inform council about the way that the region is evolving as a whole over the past year. So it's simply connecting a few dots that were considered and committed to in the ROP process. You're absolutely correct that the area municipalities are responsible now in Bill 23, once it's proclaimed, to deliver on the housing inventory. But all of the forecasts that we've made through the regional official plan process indicate that it's possible. It's certainly within the realm of possibility to meet those targets based on the work that we've done.
Yeah, I just want to be careful that we're not sort of reopening an issue that council's already dealt with. That we're not rehashing something that's already gone. It's now in another process. That process will play out. We'll respond to it when it plays out accordingly. I think we just need to make sure we're allowing things to flow the way they're supposed to flow at this point in time. So I'm just flagging that as a concern. I do know that when Bill 23 did come out, one of the things that I asked about, because what's important to me is that as we transition, in what's proposed in Bill 23, is that we recognize we have a lot of, incredibly talented individuals here at the region. And so I want to make sure that we have a process in place, and I believe I asked this at the time, if I remember correctly, that what's the dialogue between the region and local tiers happening in that regard, so that we make sure that the talent that wants to sort of stay working locally stays working locally in the fullness of time. So I'm wondering where those discussions are at.
I can ask Danielle to provide a little bit more detail, but certainly we meet with area municipal planning heads on a regular basis. I think it's a bi-weekly conversation, and the process for adapting to the Bill 23 changes is well underway, and certainly we've done a lot of internal thinking about what capacity we need to have in order to maintain our to respond effectively. But Danielle, if you have any additional detail regarding the area municipalities and our staff and so on.
Through the chair, and thank you for that, Rod. As Rod mentioned, we do meet with the planning heads on a bi-weekly basis, and we are all committed to providing a smooth transition in terms of the roles and the responsibilities moving forward. So we have started those discussions in terms of what a transition can look like, and we're happy to provide this committee and council updates as we progress further through that process, and as we become more aware of when a date of proclamation may be, which is when the changes would take effect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So we're stating that the population to be 2.7. And now, I'm saying this because I want everyone to realize that's a negative population growth. So for every 2 adults in the household, we're saying 0.7 children. Correct? Is that correct? So we're in a crisis right now where we can't get enough labor. And part of that is due to the lack of population growth. What's interesting is, I think in the townships, people are moving out to us because they want the space because they have more than a 0.7 child. So the cities are building for these apartments and townhouses and that to be the majority, with the understanding that you can only have 1 child. And very few of them will have 2 bedrooms, and they'll be the more expensive. Now that's going to townhouses and apartments. I just want to make people aware. So those that say, oh, we shouldn't be having immigration and everything else, they have to realize, the public has to realize, what's sustaining our society is immigration. And that if we don't have immigration, our society collapses because we don't have the workers to make it happen. That's all I wanted to state. I've been following these stats since I worked in special ed, so I'm going way back. And it started around the 70s, 80s, where we actually hit 0 population growth, and then we watched it go into the negatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foxton. Any other questions? This report as well was for information. Thank you, Danielle, and for answering council's questions. Okay, I think we are moving on to 7.3, sustainable transportation. I think, Mathieu, back to you. Just okay, so we are going to go to 7.2.3, Grand River Transit 2023 Transit Network for Cambridge Service Area. There is a recommendation for this. Mathieu, do you want to introduce the report?
Thank you. I'll do that briefly. So this is actually a significant change for the Cambridge bus transit network. We had implemented a first phase of service expansion in 2019 as part of the previous GRT business plan. The second phase had been planned for 2020, but was deferred because of the pandemic. So we've been working on this. This is really about adjusting the entire network, both to significant population changes in Cambridge and the intensification in Southeast Galt, and also to restructure to be able to bring people more quickly to the ION bus routes and to some key hubs in downtown Cambridge. So we've already, I would say, from a budget perspective, again, the recommendation here is just about approving the service improvements themselves and the routes. The budget, the 2023 budget, already includes the resources required for the service hours that will be added through the service expansion. So the service expansion adds about 18,000 new service hours annually. And we're expecting also an increased revenue of nearly $300,000 because of the new riders that we'll get through that service expansion. The redesign is also projected to decrease travel times to key destinations such as malls or central hubs some of them will decrease by 15 to 20 minutes, which is really significant for the residents of Cambridge. So it's really about the highlights of the network are to better connect some of these neighborhoods to major destinations such as shopping centers, schools, and employment areas. More routes to connect directly to Ainslie Terminal and Cambridge Centre Station, with connections to the frequent routes such as the 302 ION bus. And also what's important, and we've seen it especially in the pandemic where people's hours have shifted a little bit, improved hours of operation and increased frequencies during weekday evenings and weekends where we didn't have the levels that the population was looking for. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of simplification of the network to provide expanded service and more direct service to these new growth areas in Southeast Galt. And so I can stop the introduction here, and the staff is here to respond to any further questions.
I do have a question, or Councillor Liggett, you have a question?
Thank you. It's not a question. If I could just comment and say how appreciative I am on behalf of the residents of Cambridge that these changes are being made. That the region staff have heard and listened and made those changes, particularly in Southeast Galt, but also on Town Line Boulevard for the Gurdwara Temple. That's been a very dangerous crossing of the road there, but to bring the bus up north, come through Coldheart, and then down an actual bus stop at the temple. I haven't told them yet, but I'm sure they'll be very pleased when we do this today. Thank you.
Any questions, further questions or comments? Okay, I need a mover, Councillor Craig, seconder, Councillor Liggett. Give clerks a minute to get the vote up on the screen. That is carried. Good news for Cambridge, more service. I know you've been calling for that for some time now. Okay, so we will go on to the verbal update of the ION LRT winter operations. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm joined today, and I'll explain a little bit about the LRT system. So it is implemented through a public-private partnership. Our partner is a consortium called GrandLink, and Keolis is part of GrandLink, and they're a world leader in public transportation operations and maintenance, and they operate the network for us, as they do for 28 networks in 9 countries, many in northern climates. So here today in these chambers, we have Robert Beeler, who's the general manager of GrandLink, Karine Lassalle, the acting CEO for Keolis Canada, and Richard Dean, as well as Gerald Francis, who've been supporting the operations of the ION LRT through this winter. So in the public-private partnership, the region owns the ION LRT system, and Keolis operates and maintains it. And the region's role is really to monitor the performance, ensure all service requirements are being met, and kind of weave from a customer perspective, make sure that all this looks like a single network and operates as a single network for all of our regional residents. On average, Keolis is meeting their overall contractual targets for operational performance. They've achieved over 98% of their service levels required since 2019, and 95% of the trips arrive within 3 minutes of posted schedule. So if we look at the history of what are the disruptions and delays that are happening on the LRT network, over 700 trips have been missed because of collisions, and that's the main source. That's actually the main source of delays and disruptions on the LRT route. Cancellations and delays due to winter weather represent about half of what we get because of collisions. However, we understand that the major impact that sustained disruptions can have for both customers and businesses, which rely on this transit backbone for the region, requires to be better addressed. So despite these challenges, I would say the ION LRT has really confirmed its role as the backbone of the regional transit network. It carries more than 450,000 people every month, with a level of reliability and on-time performance and higher capacity that really surpasses the rest of our network. Over the past 3 seasons, the region and Keolis have made a number of adjustments to improve winter performance. First, working on snow removal coordination. So there were some issues early on after the LRT opened. But right now, even in a heavy snowstorm, and I was crossing my fingers before Saturday, but that's really shown how during major snowstorms, the operations are very smooth, and the coordination of snow clearing between the LRT, and that's that coordination also with the cities, making sure that we're not just pushing snow onto each other's properties, and that coordination is working really well, and the LRT has really good performance in the snow, and so that's been a very strong point. However, we know that both, Keolis has not been able to sustain that same level of performance in conditions of freezing rain. So we've escalated contractual pressures to ensure that both Grand Link and Keolis meet their obligations, but we also partner with them to deliver the highest possible level of service to the customers. So that's the joy of the private-public partnership, where we're both pushing each other, but we're and analyzing each other's work critically, but partnering on the delivery of the service. Digging into a little bit of freezing rain events, it's not new to the region, although what we can see is the frequency has definitely been increasing. 3 of the 6 freezing rain events that we've faced since the opening of the LRT were in this winter season. And if we dig a little bit further, going back to the 2022 climate report, which was published in partnership with the Department of Public Health in the region, we do expect freezing rain to increase because of climate change. By the 2050s, because of that change, of that warming up of temperatures and us moving into more freeze and thaw cycles during the winter and the colder winter months of December, January, and February, modeling is telling us that we can expect freezing rain to increase by about 40% in the region in the 2050s, again, only during these colder months, and decrease by 40% in the warmer winter months of November, March, and April. So but we know that these freeze-thaw cycles are going to be more challenging. And this year, it might be a statistical fluke, but it is also associated to a larger trend in changes in weather patterns. So Keolis has made a lot of efforts to improve performance lately, including a change in senior management at the local level and bringing in Gerald and Richard, who are here today from other operations in North America that they've spent time kind of fixing and making work, in particular in Boston. So the new team is working diligently to make improvements to the system, but it will likely take until next winter season to be fully implemented. I'll let them tell you a little bit more about the specific improvements that they've already made to the system and that they are continuing to develop. Some of these improvements are also designed to avoid stranded vehicles along the alignment, which is something we've heard from both I remember, I think it was in the October, November one, where they blocked some key intersections and had some impacts on global traffic. And then we've also heard from a number of businesses who had their frontages obstructed by a stranded vehicle. And that's something that we've been really working on carefully. In the meantime, I think what we've done in the past couple of weeks, what we want to do is to really, from a customer perspective, to implement the shuttle buses as proactively and seamlessly as possible. So again, we want to prepare for the worst and be ready to be able to inform passengers and maintain system resiliency, even partially, as much as possible. And that was the reason why we changed the bill of the strategy a couple of weeks ago, where we curtailed the service on a limited part of the alignment to be able to maintain that part of the frequency to clean up the ice from that part, and then be able to inform customers early on about the bus service. And unfortunately, that adds a transfer, but that did provide more certainty to our customers in the end. And so although bus bridges cannot provide the same level of service as the LRT itself, because demand is a little bit lower, I think there's still some work on that, but we're really refining our communication protocols to inform customers as early as possible, and taking that customer perspective to make that as easy as possible on these challenging freezing rain days. And I'll pass that to Richard to give us a little bit more on some of the more recent improvements they've made to the system.
Thanks. Thank you, Matteo, and thank you for letting us come to speak to you today. As you know, just building on what Matteo said, the service opened in summer of 2019 and has generally performed very well. This particular winter has been very challenging for our team, and on Thursday the 16th of February we suffered multiple challenges with vehicles failing in the freezing rain, and it took until Saturday to fully restore the service. So just to explain a little bit, as you know, there are electric vehicles, and the trains have a pantograph on the top, which is the thing that contacts the overhead wire, and the pantograph has a carbon strip on the top of it. And essentially, the area of contact is about the size of a dime. It's a very, very small contact area. And when that gets interrupted with ice, it's like unplugging a kettle. It just stops working because you've unplugged the thing from the electricity supply. So keeping the ice from building up is obviously a critical part of what we need to do. And as Matteo said, when you end up with multiple vehicles stopped across the network, the impact actually increases, because the longer things are stopped, the more opportunity there is for the ice to build up. And it's two factors really. The ice builds up on the pantograph, which pushes the pantograph downwards, away from the wire, and obviously the ice can sometimes build up on the contact wire itself. We were looking back this morning actually in terms of the statistics of all of this. We've had 4 winters of operation. We've had 15 freezing rain events in that 4 years. Some of those not noticeable because it's affected, one trip or something like that. Some of them, like the event I referred to, multiple trips. But we had 15 freezing rain events. 10 of those are this winter, and effectively 7 of them in February. So this winter certainly had a sting in the tail to it. We thought we got away with it this year, to be honest. We were sort of saying at the end of January, isn't winter been pretty benign? Certainly where I was in Boston, we were saying that. But this risk has been known about, and the primary defence is to fit a scraper device onto the top of the pantograph. And the idea of the scraper is it cuts through the ice to stop the build-up. We had this in 2021. We had a particular type of scraper. It didn't work very well. Alstom, the supplier of the tram, they came up with a new design, and that was approved for use in November. Unfortunately, Alstom have only managed to provide enough for about a third of the fleet. So about a third of the fleet have got the ice scrapers available. Next year, we'll have a lot more. there's a manufacturer called Faverley who are going to supply more of these scrapers. I have to stress, you can't leave the scraper on all of the time, because if we left the scrapers on all of the time, we would be wearing down the copper wire much more quickly than it's designed for. And that would get very, very expensive over a long period of time. So in light of the disruption that we had in the middle of February, with another freezing rain event forecast on the 22nd, as Matteo said, we took a different approach. We concentrated the service on the section between Kitchener Market and Northwood, and what that meant, we needed less vehicles to operate the service, and so we could couple them together in pairs, both of which had scrapers on, and that was very effective actually in keeping the ice from building up. Yes, it did cut down the area of operation. We were able to communicate it in advance. We were able to put the bus bridges in place, and we're able to keep our customers moving, which is the most important thing. The other thing that we did this time around was we actually painted, using paint rollers, de-icing fluid onto the wire. It's a very slow process. It's done overnight when there's no trains running. It's not quite clear how long that is good for. This is one of these situations whereby, and sometimes you want to see what the bad weather's going to bring as to whether your improvements are going to actually make a difference. But on the other hand, I don't really want the bad weather at all. But, you know, we have to keep refining these things as we go. We maintained operations throughout the night. We carried on running pairs of vehicles throughout the night to keep the ice from building up. It's an approach that's used in other places, notably in the streetcar system in Toronto. We don't want to be cutting back service, but it is the best response when we've got limited resources to try and keep the majority of people moving safely and with very little disruption. The key thing is that we have to keep learning. We have to keep refining. And this is a relatively young system. It's a dynamic system, and we're learning how it operates in different weather conditions. It is important. We recognise it's important to the region. It's important to Keolis. It's important to Grand Link that we do this. Keolis operates tram and railroad systems across the globe. As you may detect, my accent isn't very local. I work for Keolis in the UK and then latterly in Boston. I've been the GM here for all of 2 days. But one thing I would say is I've met a lot of the local team. They're incredibly dedicated, incredibly hardworking, and they want to do a good job. And what we need to do is to improve our systems and processes. We need to learn from these events, build them into the process so that the next time around we're better. And that's what we need to do and bring some of the experience we've got from across the globe to here. So that's all I really wanted to say. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Richard. I often like to say the promising practices when we're doing something that's relatively new, because things change all the time. Are there any questions from councillors? Yes, I've got Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Chair James. Just a question. Given the forecast and increase of freezing rain in the future, would the system would the current system have been designed differently if you knew that, or would you be considering a different design in the future given what you know?
So, put it this way, I think there are things that can be done to make it more robust. So, for instance, you could look at heated contact wire. We could look at heating the pantograph itself. We think we could modify the pantograph so that actually it's on the contact wire with a greater pressure. These are things that we have to think through very carefully, though, because, you know, a modification of that nature over a long period of time could have an impact on the catenary system. Yeah, so we've got to work through the engineering of that. But I think, as Matteo said, we can see that the long term is that these events are probably going to increase. And so we've got to look at what we can do from an engineering perspective and an operating perspective.
If I may, it just, it's just another example of how significant climate change is to everything that we try to look after in our community. And so hopefully you'll be able to find some resolution to the ongoing challenge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Verbanovic?
Thank you very much, and thanks for coming and making the presentation today. I think, without a doubt, you can appreciate how much our community has come to rely on the ION, and while there are stopgap measures that are put in terms of temporary bridges and so on, it's not the same. It takes people in different locations, different areas, it doesn't create the level of service that I think, folks were hoping for. And I also acknowledge that, I think overall there's a lot of great people on the team locally that operate the ION, and I know many residents have a very positive user experience with the service. I guess I'm just, as you point out, the company is not new to LRTs, and you operate around the world in different weather environments. So surely this isn't the first one where freezing rain is a reality. And so I guess where I'm struggling just a little bit is an understanding why we're having some of these experiences and learning here, because presumably, this has been experienced elsewhere.
I think freezing rain is relatively unusual, certainly my experience in the UK, where actually we were operating a third rail DC electric system. We didn't have many freezing rain events, but when they happen, they are incredibly disruptive. And to be honest, certainly, initially you go through that phase of saying, oh, well, it's a one-off. It's not worth spending the money on making modifications. And then the next year it comes along and it's a little bit worse. And you think, well, actually, maybe there is. And then we ended up doing a lot of work in terms of heated conductor rails and heated contact shoes and things like that, It is different in different areas, clearly. I think freezing rain in Canada is not unusual. It's probably more common here than other places. But I think, I don't. Was it thought of? Yes, it was thought of. We thought we had an ice scraper that worked in 2020, because I was going back through some old paperwork this morning, and actually it just didn't work. The design wasn't optimized for whatever reason. So, we just need to keep refining it and making it better. I do, one of the things I am going to be doing, though, is reaching out to colleagues in Bergen. Strangely, by birth, I'm from Nottingham, which is where there's a big tram system. So we need, we've got some contacts, and we need to find out a bit more about what other people do in detail to refine our own plans.
Yeah, I mean, either through your own company, or I'm sure there's lots written from even competitors who work in other environments and could share some of that knowledge and experience.
But if you look even locally, TTC, reduce their service when there is freezing rain forecast in Toronto. So I think there's some things that TTC do actually that we could steal with pride. Yeah.
Always a big believer in stealing ideas from other municipalities.
But yeah, they haven't solved the problem there either, not completely.
So there was a clear message you wanted to deliver to the users of the ION, who some of which are no doubt going to hear this through local media, who's covering today's meeting. What would that sort of short focused message around service commitment be?
Firstly, sorry for any, for the disruption that people suffered, particularly, in the event on the 16th of February. I think we are learning the lessons, and, you know, it's about being a little bit better every day and building that culture into the organisation so that the events of letting people down become less and less. But I'm not going to stand here and say, you know, in some big freezing rain event, the problem's going to be solved, because that would be a lie.
Sure.
But, you know, what we have to do is work really hard. You know, it's about people, process, and hardware. You know, we've got a really good system here. You know, the investment that's been made here is spectacular, especially when you look to other parts of you know, the United States, for instance. But the hardware, you know, we can make some refinements and make some improvements. The people here are great, but it's process that we need to work on.
For sure, and I think, you know, and I want to thank you for that. And I mean, it's no different than when we have an unexpected, you know, once in 20-year or 30-year rainstorm and the impact it has on the community, or, you know, we handle the 5-centimeter snowfalls really well. When 27 centimeters happens, there's more challenge that goes with it. And so it's trying to find that balance and helping customers also understand that that's just those are part of the realities of what we all have to deal with.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, you know, forecasting has got so much better over the years, of course, and we need to make sure that we're looking ahead at the forecasts and doing things proactively. And sometimes it's really tough to make those operational decisions when there's not a snowflake on the ground, or, you know, the weather outside is great, and, you know, you've got to have some faith in the forecast at times.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Just thank you, Chair Urbanovic and Richard, for answering those questions. Moving along to Councillor McCabe.
Thank you very much, and through you, Chair, and thank you, Mathieu, and to, sorry, I didn't catch your name, the gentleman from Kios, who's presenting. I appreciate you coming in to talk to us, and I just want to, part of, and I shared this with Council when the outage or the disruption occurred. I just want to remind Council, and certainly anyone who is watching the Council meeting, that we, you know, this is, I really feel like issues with transit need to always be put in a bit of perspective, because I feel like we react to them, or we see that we react to them a bit differently than we do when there's issues with respect to road closures or car crashes or vehicle crashes and things like that occur with far greater regularity. We've had this ION system in our community for about nearly 4 years. It operates really very well. This is only the second time in 4 years of operation that we've run into these issues. They were disruptive, there's no question, but as you've just talked through, you've been looking at very quickly, you know, ways to mitigate that and ways to prevent it going forward, responding to the weather that we have. So I think that's really important to keep in mind, and just as we move forward. I mean, this is a system, as you just said, that we should have great pride in our region, and I know we're looking to build it out into Cambridge as well. But our bus service and our LRT service is continuing to improve, and I want that to be the message that we really leave with anyone in our public, that it's reliable, that we are addressing issues in the very rare occurrence that they do occur, and that we are still very strongly encouraging people more and more to use the GRT and the LRT, because it is a great way to get around our community. So just want to put that into a bit of perspective, because as I said, I think, you know, there's regularly road issues on the roads where there's vehicle crashes that do great long-term injury to people. And we don't, you know, call in road engineers, and we maybe do a review once a year, but we don't have people come in front of council to answer questions. So just want to put that in some perspective, to ensure that we are thinking of these, which are both major public service infrastructures, in the same manner. So thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I just had a question. So I know some people have been talking to me, at least, like coming forward about expanded service, so running earlier, running later. Have you found that running more frequently and running 24/7 keeps the lines slightly clearer in weather events, or is it just dependent on the weather?
It's a key part of keeping the ice off the contact wire is to continue to operate overnight. But, having said that, there's also maintenance activities that we need to undertake in that no trains period. So, maybe, and I'm just making this up. So, maybe there's a case to run regular service later on a Friday night, Thursday night, Friday night, or something like that. From a passenger perspective, and doing the maintenance in the other days of the week. You couldn't run continuously all of the time without finding a different way of doing the maintenance.
Oh, okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Thank you. Councillor Huniak.
Yeah, I just want to add to the comments that have been stated. As a citizen and a councillor who relies exclusively on transit, I really love it when transit runs effectively. However, I have to keep in mind that I know many drivers who don't drive their cars in events like freezing rain. And so I think we need to look at this more holistically. And if transit is canceled, heaven forbid, 15 days a year because of 15 freezing rain events, that sucks, but we'll get over it.
Thank you, Councillor Huniak. I just want to thank you for coming today, recognizing that there was disruption for residents of our community, but also showing up here with Keolis and team from Grand Link, the transparency and the accountability, and modeling that process of collaboration and showing up today. So thank you for being here to answer council's questions and for the public to hear from you directly.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, we are on to item 8 of the agenda, 8.1, Council Committee Tracking List. We have correspondence received regarding the settlement of Jackson Harvest Farms, correspondence again received for Lancaster Street. Okay, other business. Oh, we need a motion. Oh, yes, that's where we are. So Councillor Foxton, we've got a motion on the floor from you. I need to...
Thank you. So the motion basically states that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo expand the waste recycling collection areas for downtown air to include Swan Street from Stanley Street to Fowler Street with no increase to the 2023 operating budget. So over the years, there's been an infrequency where business were collected, and for a period of time, like a year and a half, and then it was stopped for 6 months, and then the complaints came, and then it was collected again, and then it was stopped again. We were hoping for the consistency and the holisticness. I thought it had cost something, but Jennifer Rose, who is aware of this situation, said no, it would not cost anything more. So I'm asking you, please, can you pass this motion?
Okay, so moved by Councillor Foxton, seconded by Councillor Verbanovic, and okay, clerks will set up the vote. Okay, so that is carried. Okay, is there any other business anyone wants to bring up? Okay, so the next meeting for Planning and Works will be April 4th. We will now start a vote to go into closed session. Do you have other business? Oh, okay, I didn't see it here, sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Liggett, with other business.
Thank you. I just wanted to let everybody know I spent the full day session in Toronto at the Gateway to Growth Summit that happened at the Board of Trade in Toronto. And I looked at it as an opportunity, and as Mayor Verbanovic just said, to steal great ideas from other communities. But I also saw it as I could see the future of missed opportunities. I also had the advantage of having a side conversation with the Minister of Finance, so that was an added bonus to the day. The items, when I first got this, I thought of it as, oh, this is going to be Toronto-centric. It's got nothing to do with Waterloo Region, but I'm really glad I went. Some of our staff was there, and 3 of my councillors went as well. And everybody said what a great day it was and how much they learned about airports and what could happen. We had 6 breakout sessions, and a lot of them you could have applied to Waterloo Region Airport. And the keynote speaker was a gentleman from Ski Pull Airport, and he had the conversation about airport cities. And I just thought, oh my God, we haven't even thought about creating an airport city, and the opportunity for us here in this region is amazing because of our upper levels of education, the institutions for that. And some of the speakers were from the universities and colleges and said how important the airports were to their institutions. So even though sometimes something comes across our desk and it seems like it doesn't apply to us, it can, and it does. There are videos I think will be made available to the not the breakout sessions, but the main sessions. And if the region staff could get a hold of those, I think there's some good items in those for us to take as takeaways.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll now start a vote to go into close. I need a mover and a seconder. So Councillor Huniak, Councillor Williams will second that. Okay, you'll be prompted on e-scribe. Okay. Okay, so that is carried. Make sure you're in the right part in e-scribe. We'll now have to start a vote to adjourn the Planning and Works meeting. Is there a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Solonon and Councillor Noack. And you'll be prompted hopefully on e-scribe in a few moments. Okay, that is carried. Now we'll go downstairs for closed.
We're not coming back up here, are we?
No, I don't think we are. That's it.